The Bounce Breakdown is back. Harry Powell is with me to talk UFC Vegas 89 this past weekend in the UFC Apex, a 125-pound fight between Manon Fiorot and Aaron Blanchfield. One that was intriguing on paper before the fight, Harry, but not so much on the night. And that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to nitpick at this card. We're going to focus on about 5 fights. Going to take a quick look at the rest of the card after that. Then talk a little bit of Cage Warriors London as well. A couple of good performances on that we want to focus on as well. Harry, how are you, son? It's good to see you again. It's blessed to be back. And as predicted, our co-host parks up behind us right as we start talking on the couch. It doesn't seem the same when he's not in the background there, Harry.
Nah, bless him. He's fucking just sorting himself out, and anyway, yeah, I'm grand. Thanks. I am grand. We've had a long weekend here in England. So
you had Friday. Did you have Friday and Monday off? I only got Friday off over here.
Fucking both off. Both.
Back to reality. I'm back home now. I'm back to reality already. You have to suffer that consequence, like probably a lot of other people who are listening to this right now. So maybe we can make everyone's return to work a little bit easier on a Tuesday morning. But yeah, probably not with excitement on the main event anyway, Harry. It has to be said. Like I said in the opening there, an intriguing fight on paper, not so much as it went down. A one-sided unanimous decision win for Manon Fiorot. I'm going to share my quick thoughts before I'm going to let you get into it here. Looking at this, I hadn't truly made my mind up really about this fight, like literally until both women had walked into the cage. I came to the conclusion after seeing Fiorot and the size of her and the weight she had put on as well. That was the thing that was really sticking out to me. And I kind of tweeted before the fight that I felt that the strength battle, and we talked about the strength battle on the Severe setup last week, be into Fiorot's favor. And when you have that strength battle and you can maintain that strength battle, you can dictate where the fight goes. And that's exactly what happened. Blanchfield couldn't close the distance. She couldn't get the fight down. She couldn't get near with her strike. So I think that was one thing. And I'm curious to hear, because my assessment on Blanchfield's kind of performance, especially on the feet, was, she had the combinations there. She just wasn't finding a home. And I think in reality, that was down to a lack of footwork, and that was a lack of her ability to cut off the cage, to kind of, increase or decrease that kind of chance of Fiorot like getting out of the way of a lot of shots, because she seemed to be missing with an awful lot. And she did connect towards the end of the fight, but it was too little too late at that stage. And I'm very, very curious to hear what your assessment on how both these women matched up in the main event, Harry.
So I think the thing that became alarmingly obvious initially is that you've already touched on it. Fiorot was much, much bigger, much, much, much longer, and was able to sort of dictate where the range battles were going to take place. I think Blanchfield expected to be able to, over the course of the fight, break down Fiorot, to be able to break down the patterns and to be able to get inside much, much, much more than she actually was. I was also shocked at how there wasn't much of a plan B for Blanchfield. I didn't feel as though she was able to make adjustments based on what Fiorot was doing. The fourth round being, in my opinion, Blanchfield's strongest round. But it was just, I think in the context of Aaron Blanchfield's career, this is going to be an excellent learning fight for her. And I think it's going to be one where it's really, really demonstrable of what the elite level of that division really, really looks like. I do think that when in the fight, we were looking at her getting caught. So I'll stop rambling. I'll go into some technical details. One of the things that I saw that was worrying for me from the Blanchfield corner was that when Fiorot was asking Blanchfield to come on to her and Blanchfield was willingly obliging, whilst Blanchfield was trying to cut angles and trying to find a way past that right jab, there was nothing more than a 1 and then a blitz, or a 1-2 and a blitz, and to just try and navigate that right hand with blunt force rather than with sort of setups and dragging partners onto shots and parrying shots and level changing and these sorts of things. Now, the kicking game was nice from Blanchfield and was effective all night long. But the problem with the kicking game is that's exactly where Fiorot wants to be in range. She's not getting hit with shots from too far away. You're definitely not taking her down if you're kicking her. And so Fiorot was more than happy to trade kicks with you throughout the round. And I just thought that after the first, when the striking didn't go exactly to plan, I expected Blanchfield to come out fast in the second round, push Fiorot up against the cage, and us to see the sorts of things that we've seen in previous fights where there were wrestling exchanges against the fence, inside trips, outside trips, throws, takedowns, ground control, these sorts of things. And it just never happened.
Yeah.
It never happened.
Like you mentioned previous fights there, and it was actually a segue I was going to go down because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I think we've seen both of these women look much, much better in previous fights. This fight was very sloppy. It was very messy. It seemed to lack any kind of clear direction, really. Fiorot was happy to kind of fight on the outside, and Blanchfield couldn't get on the inside to implement her game plan. A lot of uproar online after this fight about the poor quality and the poor nature of this fight. Do you agree with all the naysayers in saying that this was a very poor quality fight?
I don't know about a very poor quality fight. Like, we've seen some horrific fights recently, and I'm not necessarily sure it's as awful as some of those. But look, for a main event on a card where, as we've talked about the tiering in the UFC, if it's not an Apex card, the UFC care about the card, right? They're taking it out on the road somewhere.
Unless you're St. Louis.
Unless you're St. Louis. But for the most part, the UFC care about cards that they're taking on the road. And this wasn't the level of main event that we would have expected. Now, don't get me wrong. We sat through Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza, right? That was a horrendous fight to try and watch. But so I don't think it was anything as negative as that. But I do think that styles do make fights, and Blanchfield wasn't able to force this to be a different fight than it was. And Fiorot had absolutely no need whatsoever to make this anything different than what it was. Fiorot was happily in control of those first 3 rounds, and then again in the 5th round. And why would Fiorot change anything, right? She kept the clinch battles were in her favor. She kept her back off the fence. She kept herself in striking range, and she was beating up Erin Blanchfield wherever the fight was going. And so I think sometimes I do have empathy with both of these fighters. Like, Blanchfield clearly was attempting to fight in the way that she felt was the smartest, and she just wasn't good enough. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, that's absolutely fine. And for Fiorot, I completely understand that she was doing her utmost to win the fight. And that's what's most important. Do I think that this forces, like, is this when we talked about on the setup, that this is going to be the one that carves out the absolute number 1 contender? Does this do that for Manon Fiorot? I mean, probably, in terms of there's nobody else there. And because Blanchfield looked so one-dimensional, it's very difficult to say, right, we'll quickly chuck Blanchfield back in and then launch her back up. But was this the sort of rousing, media-phrenic performance that you'd expect of a main event that then launches you in a title shot? No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's like that performance from either fighter, even in Fiorot, we'll take her performance because she was the one who got her hand raised, and it doesn't give you any great confidence that, from that level of performance anyway, that she would go in there and do anything against Alexa Grasso or Valentina Shevchenko, and that kind of, pours cold water over it and maybe forces the UFC into possibly doing another number one contender fight. However that may work out, maybe you're looking at a Rose versus Fiorot rematch or something like that. That might be an option, because the way we're looking at it now, Harry, is that Shevchenko and Grasso, they're not fighting until September in the Sphere. I would say. I don't know. I think they've announced it for that. So then you're going to be waiting another couple of months for that other fight to kind of materialize. So I don't know whether Fiorot is going to want to stay on the sidelines, but that nonetheless, we shall digress. Any names, or shall we move on?
Look, it's difficult for both, right? I think Blanchfield, I want to see Blanchfield back in there relatively quickly. I know that she took a bit of damage, and so obviously make sure she's healed up and everything else. But I would like to see, bearing in mind she's still so young in her career, I would
24.
24 years of age.
Yeah, like she's loads of time to come back, doesn't she? Like,
right. When I said in the context of her career, this is going to be a great learning fight, I think sometimes we forget that Erin Blanchfield has stormed through this division at a very, very, very young age. And sometimes you need this. It is very, I think it's demonstrable of how good her A game is, that it has taken basically a number one contenders fight to show her that her A game isn't enough to win everywhere. And that, I think, shows you the upside of Erin Blanchfield. And we should take this fight as a blessing in some ways, because it means that Erin Blanchfield is going to come back. It means that Erin Blanchfield has something for us in the long run of this division. And it means that she is undoubtedly going to be a player, because we have seen how much she has progressed over her career in the short space of time that we've been watching her. And so, and when she goes back and she reevaluates and she starts to build out that B game a little bit more, maybe even a C and a D game, then we're going to see her back. We're going to see her moving on leaps and bounds. And
25 valuable minutes for Erin Blanchfield there. That definitely has to be said. Co-main event, Harry, Vicente Luque versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, my number one assessment, I see you wincing here, and I have a feeling what way you're going here, but like there's no other assessment here, only that to me, Vicente Luque gave up in this fight. He just seems like a man who doesn't really want it anymore. And, you know, it's not the usual, you know, Vicente Luque always took the bull by the horns, always kind of, you know, gritted his teeth and got stuck into the trenches. But he found a little bit of resistance on Saturday night, Harry, and he kind of wilted under that resistance. And look, fair enough, Joaquin Buckley, strong, athletic fella, a difficult matchup, but it's not the Vicente Luque that we're used to seeing inside in that octagon. And it was very worrying for me looking from afar.
I just don't really know what happened. Like, and what I mean by that is the first round was competitive enough, you know, like Buckley has such a strange style when he is so, I think I sort of had a story arc in my brain as I was watching this fight. Like Buckley came in and was just the athlete. No technique whatsoever, just the athlete. Everything was big power. Everything was throwing. He gassed so hard, so early because everything was power, blah, blah, blah. And then the Impa Kasanganai knockout happens and everyone's like, oh my God, this guy's the freak of the freak athletes. He can do everything. He can do this, whatever. And all of that's grand, right? All of that is grand. He finds himself at a slightly a tough spot where he's into this massive, like the most viral moment the UFC's ever had online and all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. He goes away and he actually tries to learn how to fight a little bit. And you start to see him progress into that. He's got a bit of a jab, but he's got some takedown defense where he's actually using underhooks and he's trying to sprawl on things and he's trying to set shots up and he's trying to do stuff properly, right? And those things I think were really, really, really impressive. But when you have a performance like this, what he's done so well is that he's melded both things now, where he's got a little bit of technical acumen about him. He can throw a nice jab. He's got some nice kicks. He can move out of the way of some stuff, but he still has that athletic movement in that he jumps side to side. He throws those big hooks because he's bouncing side to side and leaping into positions so often. And Vicente in the first round was a little perplexed by that. He was getting hit by some shots, by some angles that I don't think he was used to, but this is Vicente Luque, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's Vicente Luque. That's what he made his name off of. He gets hit with a couple of awkward shots, finds a way, or just comes back and just fires. You know, a guy who's was never afraid to fire off in the pocket. But look, it has to be said, Harry. You know, we're talking about 2 fights ago for Vicente Luque coming back from a brain bleed, and how much must that hang over your head when you're in there taking shots to the chrome, like, you know, or to the dome, I should say. Mm-hmm. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like a guy to me is like, you know, you might think you want it. You might think you still want it until, you know, you kind of find out that you don't want it. And look at, you know me, man, I've been talking up Vicente for a long time. Genuinely one of my favorite fighters to watch, because he was a guy that always kind of went out on his shield and had a killer be killed mentality, had that killer instinct, but it looked like to have kind of disappeared coming into round 2. And, you know, even the weird defense for the ground and pound where Joaquin Buckley was in his guard and he just kind of turtled up rather than trying to put the foot on the hips or create space or looking to get back up to his feet. He kind of just accepted it. And, I was like, oh man, this is not a good sign at all. But, completely understandable, that being said, that kind of mentality, given what he's been through in the last couple of years.
I mean, is it though? To me, right, when Joaquin Buckley, Vicente essentially pulled guard, right? Like he essentially pulled guard, but he pulled guard into a shelled up position. And we've said ad nauseum before, if you're on bottom in MMA, you're losing. And secondarily, the grappling's effectiveness in MMA is so diminished in terms of what it used to be. And Vicente knows that. Right, Vicente is not in a gym where it's just him and there's nobody else, right? He is in a room with lots of very good fighters. And we say, like, you may want it and then you don't want it. But there's better fighters than Joaquin Buckley in that team that he's training in that room.
Yeah, but maybe we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. We don't know how hard those sparring sessions are. You know what I mean? We don't know if we're going at 100%. We don't even know if he's taking headshots at all sparring, anymore. We just don't know those kind of things. Like, I don't know. Yeah, not to kind of fight back a little bit. I think what you're saying definitely has substance as well, Harry.
No. I mean, you're absolutely right. We don't know, and I just feel like to watch Vicente, one, pull guard, and then two, do nothing with the pull was demonstrable, and then three, to watch him shell up like he did. And I think even Joaquin Buckley was a little bit shocked, to be honest, because he started to throw shots and then was like, oh, there's literally just nothing coming back. And so I'm just going to keep throwing shots. And I think the referee was a bit like, what's going on here? Like, should I have stepped in earlier? Like, what? It was just a really, really strange decision from Vicente. Now, maybe there's an injury, maybe something happened in camp. Obviously, like you said, we've no idea. But if not, if Vicente was healthy and in the moment and made a conscious decision to pull, I think we have to have a very serious conversation with ourselves as to exactly what we're doing this for in the not so near distant future.
100%. But let's finish the talk on this fight about Joaquin Buckley. A good win, the biggest win of his career, and he finds himself in a good position in the welterweight division now, Harry. And I have a name. I wonder if you agree. I'd love to see him in there with Sean Brady next.
You stole it right out of my fucking mouth.
Sorry, brother. Sorry.
No, absolutely. That's the right choice, because Sean Brady needs a fight, right? He was very, very unfortunate to not be able to perform a couple of weeks back. Joaquin Buckley now has earned a name. You can't
stole Brady's place. That was who Brady was supposed to fight.
Right. And so I'm sure Sean Brady wouldn't mind that fight, right? That's certainly a winnable fight for Sean Brady if Sean Brady's operating anywhere near the level that we expect him to operate at. But yeah, that's the fight. That's the fight.
100%. We're going to stop at Chris Weidman versus Bruno Silva. Oh gosh, I don't even know where this conversation is going to go, but this was an insane fight, like complete shit show, to be honest. Just a complete shit show. There should have been points taken from Weidman for multiple eye pokes. The referee made a bags of the finish, missed the last eye poke, stepped in early as is, I thought anyway, which he had a tendency to be doing all night. Gary Copeland was the ref. I kind of was a little bit outspoken. Look at it. Yeah, in the heat of the moment, you're not as understanding as maybe after, but I think he made a couple of mess ups there on the night, but none bigger than what we've seen in this Chris Weidman and Bruno Silva fight. And I mean, it was absolutely insane, Harry.
Yeah. I mean, I saw people on the broadcast tweeting saying this is the best that Chris Weidman's looked. I mean, let's relax, lads. He looked,
I said he looked good, but that was in comparison to his last performance where he looked absolutely shot. And for him to be, as active, not getting tired and stuff, I thought he looked good. But to say he looked the best of his career against a guy who wasn't really throwing any attacks for the rounds 1 and rounds 2, like somewhat you're thinking with Bruno Silva, what is he trying to do here? Like, he wasn't throwing any shots, didn't throw any leg kicks, didn't want to kind of throw any, like, he wanted to kind of explode in the second round maybe, but he didn't throw anything in the first round and kind of played into Weidman a little bit. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. It was a weird fight.
Yeah, I mean, in the first round, Weidman did a good job of wrestling, like just grappling, right? Just grappling. And I understand that for Bruno Silva, he wants to be on the feet, he wants to be banging, he wants to be doing these sorts of things. That's fine. In the second round, I thought that the low kicks were a good option for Weidman, and he used them nicely. Silva just overextended on all of his shots. I watching Bruno Silva last night on Saturday night. I don't know how he went 3 rounds with Poatan.
Either do I. It's one of the 8 wonders of the world, to be honest to me. I don't know how he did it. Even after that fight happened and I hadn't seen any other fights, I was wondering. And then what Pacheco has done with everybody else as well. I mean, yeah, it's one of the wonders of the world that we'll have, Harry.
Ridiculous. But over and back, I thought Weidman still didn't look comfortable taking shots, and he definitely took some big shots in there. I think he is still just moving backwards in a straight line. He's not circling. The head movement it just is more awkward than it is anything else. And I don't know. Bruno.
I thought he looked uneasy on that back leg, understandably so as well. I noticed it going into the octagon, and I noticed I kept a very close eye on how he was putting his weight down on it, how he was moving it down on it as well. And it looked like, he threw it a couple of times, but he was more focused with the front or with the lead leg, the left leg of Weidman. But yeah, it looked very, very uneasy, unsteady as well. And maybe some of that lateral movement would be because of that leg injury and the limitations on his mobility because of that nasty leg break.
I mean, possibly, but at 39 years of age, right, we have to question if we're not 100% and we're not willing to be able to fight wherever the fight goes, why are we fighting?
It's the $1 million question, Harry, that we could ask a lot of fighters, I think.
We really could. We really, really could. I just, I thought you summed it really well. The whole fight was a bit of a debacle, to be honest. Referee had a nightmare night, to be honest, the referee. And I think you said before, I had the same opinion. I don't think Weidman looked amazing. I thought Bruno Silva was getting to him, especially at the end of the second and the early third. And what do we do? What do we do now? Like, you're not going to run that fight back. I don't need to see it again, right? It's not like there's this vast, inconclusive finish. And then you look up and down the middleweight rankings. So many of these fighters are already booked. And so who do you put him with? Who do you put Weidman with? Like, you can.
I think the ref fucked up the whole plan. I think Weidman was going out there to try and get a win, and was en route to getting a win where you might have seen him hang up the gloves, but he's not going to want to hang it up like this.
No, he's not. No, he's not. And like we said, who do you put him against? Right?
Exactly.
Is it Rzeboyev? You don't want to do that.
No.
Can't do it against Joe Pyfer. That's too early. You don't
bring back Brian Barberena. That's what he said. It's not going to be a good night for a lot of guys.
Tavares.
Yeah.
They'll do Tavares.
Let's talk about the end of the fight for a minute. What would you have liked to seen happen in that scenario, Harry?
I mean, first of all, I think the second eye poke should have been a point deduction.
Point deduction, yeah.
The entire fight, Weidman, and it was strange that he was doing this as well. So both fighters were orthodox, and Weidman was reaching with the lead hand to hand fight the backhand of Bruno Silva. And I don't know why, right? So often fighters will paw at the lead hand so they can stop the jab, right? If they can stop the jab, they can time the jab, they can land their own jab, and they can start moving forward with their own combinations. Like, clearly Weidman was worried about the right hand of Silva. That's fine. But you beat the right hand with head movement and footwork. You don't extend out, because then Bruno could just come over the top with that right hand if he wanted to. And so the fingers outstretched. I mean, Mark Goddard gets a lot of hate online and whatever, but how often do you hear him screaming at a fighter that you can have your fingers out, but they must be pointed to the ceiling? Brandon Moreno style, right? Where his fingers are pointed at the ceiling.
And with Goddard, I think, they call him the school principal kind of at times, because he does command that respect and looks out for the safety of the fighter. Sometimes it might maybe be too much for some people, but you've got to command that octagon when you're the ref. You've got to tell these fighters what you want from them. And Copeland is just waiting around and looking at this happen all night. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
the first one was bad. The second one was brutal. And how he did, and he tried to justify it by saying, oh, both fighters poked each other in the eye. Well, that two wrongs don't make a right here. It was still Weidman's second foul. Like, what the fuck are you saying here, man? I was cracking up on the couch. But yeah, I just made a real bags of it. Like, even, you know, it would have been justified even after that second eye poke when Weidman was holding his hands out like that for Copeland to stop this fight and bang, take a point, and that's it. That's your punishment there. And then you wouldn't have had the shit show that ended the fight either. So, I mean, we're definitely not getting, yeah, our ads will definitely be monetized after this one. We're shitting and effing out of us like the cows have come home. But it's really frustrating to see. It's like, come on, man. He had an absolute horror night. But there's not too much more to be said about that. Any final thoughts, maybe, Harry? I'll leave you the floor or anything like that.
Chris Weidman's a legend, and I don't want to see him stay in MMA long enough that at 39 years of age, something really, really terrible happens again. Because this isn't, you know, we've been through the Luke Rockhold, and we've managed to claw our way back from Luke Rockhold. We've now broken a leg. We've managed to claw our way back from a leg break. Generally, things come in threes, and I don't really need to see the third for Chris Weidman.
100%. We're going to skip down through a good few fights here. We're going to stop at Mckee versus Chidi and Njoukani. We'll rustle back to the other ones and cover them really quickly, but we're going to talk about Mckee versus Njoukani here. And look, unfortunately for Mckee, couldn't get going again once the octagon cage door closed. I thought he started really, really, really well, and I was like, yes, here we go. Lots of movement. Lots of feints, lots of activity, tried to set a pace, and it was working well. The jabs were working. Chidi was finding it hard to kind of find his range with his punches, and with his knees, and, you know, found the calf kick fairly well. But I thought Reese was, even though he was reddened up, he was dealing with them quite well. Didn't look to be too unstable on that leg either. But, you know, in my opinion, took round one. Three judges scored it still for Chidi, probably based off those calf kicks. I thought Reese landed enough at the very early stages of round one, and landed a couple of nice ones again at the end of the round as well, that just maybe saw him squeak over the line. But what we seen in round one is not what we seen in rounds 2 and round 3, where we saw Mckee trying to close the distance, try to grapple against the fence, and just try and formulate a game plan that just really wasn't working, and abandoned throwing any damage, and it was ultimately that cost him the fight. And it's such a pity. He was such a nice guy, a talented fighter, just can't make it happen, Harry, inside the octagon.
I think that the leg kicks must have done something, otherwise we wouldn't have seen the switch away from a game plan that was working as well as it was. I'm in the similar camp to you, that first round was a close round, but I scored it for Reese. I thought he was doing good enough work. He looked big in there. He looked strong in there. He looked good in the clinch situations. And he was pushing Njoukani around, both with the teeps, with his jabs, with the footwork. And then, yeah, I saw the reddening of the left leg, and I made a note of it in my notes. And then the second round and the third round, the output just fell off a cliff. And that is not the Reese that we know. That's not the Reese that we have seen in fights under different promotional banners. And so something tells me that a decision was made there, or a variable changed in that fight. We won't know until we speak to him. And even if we speak to him, we may never know. But I get the feeling that something must have changed in order to force him into a harder, heavier grappling style. And like you said, it didn't work for him. And all Chidi and Njoukani needed was a couple of shots in each round to sway the damage counters. And it's a pity for Reese. It is a pity, because we have seen him at that level at Cage Warriors. But sometimes, you know, guys go to the UFC and it's just not their story. You know what I mean? It's just not their story. And if that's the case for Mckee, then at the very least, he can say that he gave absolutely everything, not just going once, but battling back twice. And there'll be another fight. Don't get me wrong.
I think so too. Just to talk about rounds 2 and rounds 3, I think the narrative, or, you know, what I was saying, and a lot of other people I was talking to were saying as well, was, you know, Chidi was going to be dangerous inside 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes. after that, with the weight cut, with his history of gassing out, we would have seen him wilt a little bit. Maybe Reece was trying to create those grappling exchanges and clinch exchanges to try and wear on Chidi, but he just wasn't going away. It just was not going away whatsoever. And to me, it kind of highlighted that it's very, very important to get yourself involved with the UFC PI Center, because that's where Chidi came up. They ensured that he had a safe weight cut. They ensured that his gas tank was on point for 15 minutes, and he looked like a tank in there. Now, Reece did match up to him in terms of size, which I was very surprised about. Reece had put on a good bit of weight as well. I do feel the jab was a lot slower. I do feel the 1-2 was a lot slower. Was it because there was a little bit more weight on Reece as well? But ultimately, it comes down to the game plan simply not working for Reece Mckee, or the switch of the game plan simply not working from what it was in round 2 into rounds 1, and I should say going into rounds 2 and rounds 3. And like I said, I don't think this is the complete end of the road for Reece Mckee. I think this would be the second fight he's lost on the second stint in the UFC. So 0-4 right now, but one of those losses coming from Hamza Chimaev over to Alex Morono. So I hope he does get another shot, but he's got to pull something out of the bag here, because he can't go in and perform like he has been performing in there, because the chances are he's not going to get the job done, and he'll probably tell you that himself. And it's a mystery, really. I was surprised. I love his energy before the fight. I love his energy at the weigh-ins. I love his interview with Andy. He seemed very good, and had that little bit of venom talking about what he was going to do in there. But unfortunately for him, it did not materialize on the night. Any final thoughts, Harry, before we move on?
I just hope that we can see, even if, like I said, the UFC if the story is not that Reece Mckee has a long-time career in the UFC, I just hope that we get to see him as we know him in the UFC. I hope we get to see him put on a performance that we are used to him seeing. Like I said, it could be that he even loses that fight, right? But if he goes out and he performs like he knows he can perform, then even for just himself, you are much, much, much happier, and you will take far less regret with you if you can go out and perform to the best of your ability, whether that's good enough or not good enough. I think we both know that it is good enough if he goes out to get wins in the UFC. But if he goes out, because just to slightly tangent, the other side of this is the UFC could match him horribly next time. You know what I mean? That's a possibility. Yeah. I don't think they will, but they could. I'd like to see him on the London card. Let's just get him in there. Not a ton of damage taken, and let's give him a chance, maybe closer to home soil, same time zone, these sorts of things. Let's see. But yeah, I hope Reece can keep his head up.
100%, me too. Not all doom and gloom for Irish MMA on the night. Loughran picked up a fantastic win over Angel Pacheco. Really impressed with Caelan in this one, Harry. I think came out confident, pushed the pace, found his range so quickly in this, and got off some serious shots on the feet. And Pacheco, we saw how tough he was in Dana White Contender Series, showed his toughness here again. And bar a couple of shots landed on Caelan, it was almost a perfect night for him. But he'll be very happy with that performance. And I know there would have been a lot of pressure on him from him, and with the crowd that's coming over there to watch him fight. But he really delivered on multiple fronts against Pacheco. Were you impressed?
I was indeed. Yeah, I was indeed. He needed that. And I think you saw immediately at the end of the third, as the final whistle went, you could sort of feel and see the relief spread over him, and that was a really beautiful thing to see, because that man puts a lot of pressure on himself. He talked about it on the old triangle with you guys. And, he has such high expectations of himself, and he puts so much pressure on himself that when he goes out and can deliver like that against Angel Pacheco, which, let's be honest, is not the stiffest test probably of his career so far, let alone the stiffest test that he will face in the UFC, but he had to go out and he had to do it. And to go out and to do it in the style that he did, I was really, really impressed with. I really liked how he mixed up the game plan. I think Kalen actually was his best in the second and the third when he's mixing everything together, when he's level changing under Pacheco's shots, when he's choosing to land big body shots, when he's landing really nice counter right hands that are hurtful, damaging shots. And then when he gets to his opponent's hips, you just get to see what his bread and butter is, right? And his mixture of damage and grappling is something that I was really appreciative of, and I think that's something that's going to pay dividends for him in the future. Go on.
I was going to say, you could argue the fight could have been stopped in the second round at a certain stage as well. I mean, given the way other fights were stopped on the night, I mean, he's kind of robbed of a stoppage really in the second round. But I agree with pretty much everything that you said. I think, you know, a win like that for Kalen opens up lots of different other avenues, especially for his next performance as well, because, you know, you do have that pressure of getting that first win. And also getting the reps. He talked about after the fight, getting those. He said you get the regional show reps, you get the Cage Warriors reps, but then you get UFC reps at a high level. And, you know, his toughness, Pacheco's toughness was on show. Maybe another bantamweight mightn't have took those shots that he took. But you know what? Overall, I think Kalen will be glad to have gotten that 15 minutes under his belt. Didn't look tired, didn't look weary at all, looked as strong at the end of as he did at the start. And, you know, very promising performance. A couple of small things to work on. You know, a lot of people were saying, you know, maybe the head on the center line has been something that has been talked about throughout his professional career, to be honest. But look, there's lots of time to grow here for Caolan Loughran. I think I'd rather focus on the positive of this performance rather than focus on the negative, because, you know, all that outside noise, the pressure coming in to get that first win, that will kind of unchain him, I think, going into his next UFC fight. Called out Rahul Rosas Jr. Do you like that call out?
I don't mind that call out. I think he's very smart in making that call out, right? He knows what he's doing. There are two names that I would have if that fight falls through. One is of similar ilk. And what do you think about Peyton Talbot?
Yeah, that's a good fight. That's a good fight against two good prospects.
The other is they could chuck him in there with Rani Yahya.
I think slow roll him a little bit. Let's not get him in with the Yahya's just yet.
Yeah, but the reason why I say Yahya is so close to the end of his career. And I think the thing with Kalen is Kalen talks so well that people are going to care less about who he fights and more about what he's got to say. And I think with Kalen, you could do the veteran test early and you could say, look, Rani Yahya.
He's kind of already got that though with the fella in Paris. I can't remember his name now. With the guy he fought in Paris. God, I can't
forgot his name as well. Hold on, let me pull up his record.
I have it up here. Give me 1 second. Oh my God, Taylor Lapilus, like, who is probably unknown, but still very experienced. When you look at Lapilus had, at the time he fought Caolan Loughran, he had 21 fights in comparison to Caolan's 8. So, I mean, the veteran test was there already, and he did fucking well in that veteran test too, it has to be said. Is it time to give him another one? I say no. I think you're talking about the Talbots, you're talking about the Rosas Juniors, maybe the Cameron Simons. Give him 2, 3, 4 of those, and then look at, even if Yahya ain't around, somebody else is going to be around. There's always going to be some poor veteran that has to come in against the young hungry lion. I don't mind your idea, but I kind of prefer to see him with similar level competition, giving him his chance to kind of get to where he needs to get to before he comes in with that more experienced one. But look, at I said, if it's Yahya next, I'd still be happy to see it too. That being said.
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference was Peyton Talbot. I think that's a fantastic fight. I think that the call out of Rosas Jr. he'll probably be granted, frankly. Both talk, both young. I mean, Caelan's 27, so he's not as young as Rosas Jr., obviously, but both young in the division. Both are available. And yeah, I mean, I would love, and I don't think Caolan may want to wait around this long, but I would love to see that in the Sphere. One, just for Caolan to get that experience, right? Like, that's going to be a mad show altogether. But I think
I might have to get my my piñata or my
your sombrero.
Sombrero out for that one as well and travel down to the Sphere. If that did happen, that'd be a cracker of one. And smart call out, smart matchup. I'd like to see it. I think it's a good fight for Kalen as well. I think he's a little bit more developed, a little bit more fight IQ, more power, and probably stronger than Rosas Jr. And like I said, you called it. You hit the nail on the head. That's a smart call out from the Don. And it'll be exciting to see what happens in his career. Very happy to see him get his first UFC win, the first of many, I would imagine. Harry, I'm going to start naming fights here. I'm going to ask you to just come in and share your thoughts on it. I might piggyback off it. We're going to do just a full card overview here, starting off with Nursultan Rozabov and Cedric Dumas. Savage uppercut and ground and pound, getting Dumas out of there in round one. Rozabov looking a little bit dangerous at 185 now, Harry. He deserves probably a bit of a push after a win like that.
Not dangerous. Both guys just threw big lunging uppercuts, and it just happened that Rajabov landed and Dumas didn't. Neither are great fighters. Rajabov, I think there is probably another side to him that we haven't seen yet. Right there, he's got some good ground and pound wins on his record, and so there's obviously some grappling there somewhere, and so maybe there's an element of that we haven't seen. But yeah, Dumas is not UFC caliber, so yeah, fair play to both of them.
Indeed, one said about Dumas more. Oh my God, I can't think of anything today. What happens when you go to jail and you get your picture taken?
Mugshot.
More mugshots than fights. Cedric Dumas has, I believe. So, yeah, fair play to him is right. Yeah. Kyle Nelson, Bill Algeo, controversy over the finish here. I thought Kyle Nelson was after giving himself the kiss of death, bringing his newborn kid to watch him fight this week, kissing him in lovely. I love seeing it, but I you know me, I don't know if it's the best idea bringing your kids and whatever, everyone to their own, but I don't like it. We've seen some sad times with kids in attendance, but Nelson, it worked for him. It worked for him this time. So he's like saying, fuck you, O'Neill. Try and criticize that. Landed a lovely punch in the knee, getting Bill Algeo out there. A little bit of controversy over the finish. These two boys, Algeo wanted to kind of come in here and pick apart. Kyle Nelson was like, not today, went hammer and tongue. And then Algeo just decided, okay, if you're going hammer and tongue, I'm going hammer and tongue. He ended up getting clipped, getting wobbled a couple of times. Referee came in. He did a little bit of the stanky leg dance, but, I thought this was a little bit too soon as well. What did you think about?
I don't have a huge problem in that I think it was obvious where the fight was going. But in the same vein, if I'm Bill Algeo, I'm fucking furious because I was still conscious and I was still there. I was damaged. I was hurt. Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. But I was still there. I was still throwing shots back. I thought Kyle Nelson actually made a bit of a meal of the finish as well, to be honest. I thought he overthrew on a lot of those shots and kind of rushed and was a bit messy in some of those shots. I think if he had taken a slight step back and had picked his shots and found the range that he wanted to fire them in, he would have put Bill Algeo away properly. But, he did what he needed to do at the end of the day. I think I wouldn't.
My only problem with the stoppage is that I feel there was better moments where the ref could have stepped in there, where he was in a kind of more out of his consciousness. But it was more that I feel that he regained consciousness, but his body didn't regain control. And I'm not going to die on the hill on that. I was a little bit disappointed on the night. I thought, I'd be a guy of, wonder what happens after, but I wouldn't be too critical about that whatsoever. But let's move on. Nate Landwehr versus Jamal Emmers. Nate Landwehr, Harry, don't put your head in your hand. What a great man Nate Landwehr. If you come out with a statement like, come on in here and beat the shit out of me and see what happens, you got my double thumbs up here. But that's exactly what happened in this fight. He got the shit beat out of him and then just threw an uppercut from his grandmother's house, and it was all over for Jamal Emmers. The tough as they come, Nate Landwehr. Not technically savvy, that being said, but
I mean, look, he did a perfect job at what he is good at, right? Which is he brings fighters into a false sense of security where he's a bit bloody, he's a bit damaged, but inside that meat vehicle, he's grand. Like, he is fine. He is where he needs to be. He is where he wants to be. And he's so confident that he will find the one shot that he found against Jamal Emmers in this fight that will change everything. And that's who Nate Landwehr is like. That's exactly who he is. And so he is the second coming of Darren Elkins, whereby he knows that there's no very little amount of damage that can put him away, right? It's going to take an overwhelming amount of damage to put him away. It's going to take an even larger, overwhelming one shot to put him away. And so, okay, what he doesn't have in technical proficiency, he makes up for in heart and in toughness and in durability. And so, is he going to go and win a title? No, sure, that's fine. But you need Nate Landwehr's in those divisions, right? Nate Landwehr is your Cub Swanson at the end of his career. He is your Joe Lozon. He is your Donald Cerrone. He is your Jim Miller. He is the fighter that people want to get behind because he is fighting for the entertainment of fighting, not necessarily to go out and as an athletic sort of endeavor that he goes out and I'm desperate to win a title. This is my entire life. No. He's going out because he enjoys the entertainment of fighting. And you absolutely need that in a division.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Very well said there. Looking at Fernand Jandiroba versus Lupitina Godinez, Lupi kind of faced a similar kind of problem that Aaron Blanchfield found, is that, difficult kind of puzzle to figure out is Fernand Jandiroba. Lupi couldn't get in there. She tried with her striking, she tried with her grappling, but overall it was just the crispness of the striking of Jandiroba. And she's been on a hell of a run lately. Maximum credit to her. What were your thoughts on the fight?
I thought Lupi performed horribly, to be honest. I thought that the Lupi that we are used to is somebody that is dogged. She's not hesitant. She's go. She's all action. She's grindy. She's in your face. And there was just none of that, really. From the get-go, there was none of that.
Did she kind of overthink her performance in certain terms? Maybe let the moment get to her a little bit?
I mean, I don't know about the moment get to her, but I definitely agree with that she overthought her performance. Like, what are we doing sat in a saddle, which is a leg lock configuration, for 2 minutes? What are we doing? Like, Lupi will know that from there she could have taken an underhook with her right hand and got up. She could have. She chose not to. And Jandiroba was like, well, you're not going to leg lock me. This is fucking MMA. And just started punching her in the head. And so what are we doing just sat there? I don't understand. And I felt like maybe don't get me wrong, I agree that Jandiroba is a very difficult puzzle to solve. Like, when do you see modern mixed martial artists pulling deep half? You just don't. You don't see modern mixed martial arts artists. Jesus, both of us are having a horrendous time for English today. You just don't see people pulling in that capacity. It's just not common in mixed martial arts. And so, whilst I thought Godinez did a good job of not getting swept and playing counter grappling in those specific nuanced positions, she just made some awful decisions that you don't usually see her make in fights. And I really thought that was a fight that she could have, that was perfect for her wheelhouse. Wrestling against pure grappling, you should be winning that 9 times out of 10. And in the striking, Jandiroba is long, and I expected that to cause problems, but Godinez has shown some nice in and out footwork, and we just didn't see any of it. So it was an odd night altogether. Or the whole card was odd. But
it was a very strange card overall. I'll run through 3 quick ones here. Julio Arce beat Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns started well, wilted in the second round via KO. It was kind of a standard.
That's awful.
Yeah, just standard like performance from Herbert Burns there. Dennis Bazooka took out Connor Matthews with a nice left hook and a hammer fist. A bit of a war before that fight happened. Bazooka needed to get that win. He was without a win in his UFC career, got that offered. Ibo Aslan versus Ankin Turkali. It was a war. That was an absolute war. And one of these, I was surprised one of these guys took it until the 3rd round to go down, but it was Aslan getting that revenge defeat. I got an Aslan joke tweet up onto the broadcast too, to my pure amusement about that, just completely taking the piss there. So, yeah, Turkali, I mean, it's all done for him in the UFC as well. I think that was his 4th defeat in a row. I'm going to stop at Jacob Malkoun versus Andre Petroski because I didn't tell you to watch this fight, but I told you to watch the finish, and I'm very curious to get your assessment on what happened. Apparent clash of Petroski's head to the hip of Jacob Malkoun. Stunned him. Malkoun then, we were talking about Wayne Rooney's volley against Newcastle here on one of the episodes last week. Well, Malkoun ran up and absolutely struck an unmerciful soccer kick to the body of Petroski to finish it. He was in bits after it, understandably so. But I think the big story came of the apparent kind of beginning of the end, where Petroski shot for a takedown, got a little bit clipped with an overhand left, but they reckoned it was the hip that did the damage. Even came out today with a picture of a cut in his head, Harry, after the fact. And I want to know what the hell is in Jacob Malkoun's hip. I almost feel sorry for his missus.
Jesus, that took a pause. Big pause. What I will say is that it's definitely a real thing that you can get wobbled if you land horrifically into somebody's hip when shooting a takedown. I think that is partially a skill issue, right? You shouldn't be leading with your head in that way. But I mean, can you get hit and rocked and wobbled? I mean, obviously it depends where you get hit and all of that sort of stuff, but it's certainly the wildest sort of wobbling that I've seen from a fighter. I don't think I've ever seen it before in MMA, and I don't expect to see it again for a long, long time in MMA. But the soccer kick was like, is he Johnny Wilkinson
I don't know.
in the World Cup final? Like, what are we doing? Like, that is like, there's sporting moments, and then there's a fella literally kicking a fella out of a cage. Like, that was
Jesus Christ! He almost ran on the spot to get up the little bit of acceleration, then took off and absolutely nailed Petroski with that kick to the body. It was absolutely tremendously impressive. And I'd say
would be impressed,
lad. I'd say if he struck a ball like that, it'd still be up in the air. So it was fucking insane. But yeah, crazy stuff. That kind of epitomized the craziness of UFC Atlantic City. I think I might have even called that UFC Vegas 89 at the start, but it was UFC Atlantic City. I mean, we're getting so many Apex cards now; they're kind of all feeling like Apex cards. But we shall move from Atlantic City and we'll head over to London town. Cage Warriors London went down last Saturday, right before the UFC. Shout out to Vucenic, who did finish Simoniana right on the time of the UFC was starting. So maximum credit to him. But Harry, I'm not even going to say anymore. The severe spotlight shone on Jordan Vucenic from his Saturday night's performance. Please give us the old lyrical version of the cut down version of the severe setup over on SevereMMA.com. Head over and check that out if you have not done that already.
Thank you very much. I just think the time is now for Jordan Vucenic, right? Like, he spoke very openly and very candidly about where he is, I guess, in his career. He mentioned that the reason why he wasn't interested in fighting for another title for Cage Warriors was because of the Champions Clause that becomes into effect when he does win or would win the title for Cage Warriors. And clearly he wants to move on to bigger and better things, whether that's the UFC or otherwise. But Simoniana came in and gave Jordan everything he needed to put himself in the shot window for somebody like the UFC. He was aggressive. He tried to land big damage on Jordan Vucenic, and Jordan Vucenic was able to navigate that first round quite nicely. He landed some really, really lovely elbows. He talked in his post-fight press conference about how a lot of the camp was going to be drawing Deanna onto whether it be a right hand or a right elbow, and I think he showed both of those things really, really, really cleanly. I really enjoyed watching him mix up, as he always does, the striking and the grappling. When he got it to the ground, he looks great. There was lots of control positions. He didn't rush things. Everything was nice and smooth. Everything was controlled. And he eventually gets a Kimura, which you don't see very often, frankly, in MMA. It's most often it's arm bars or it's rear naked chokes, right? But it was cool to see a Kimura to sort of roll back the ages. But yeah, I just think that Jordan Vucenic was part of one of the best sort of trio of fighters that Cage Warriors has ever seen. That featherweight division at one point with Morgan Charrier, Paul Hughes, and Jordan Vucenic was the most talent-rich division that I think we've ever seen in Cage Warriors. And we have obviously talked ad nauseum about Paul Hughes needing to be signed, and I think we should continue to do that until he is signed. But for Morgan Charrier to be in the UFC and for Paul Hughes and Jordan Vucenic to not be in the UFC is criminal. And again, that's not to say that Morgan Charrier doesn't deserve to be there. He absolutely deserves to be there. He is of the same quality. But and I sort of I don't know whether I said this publicly or not, but I feel like of the three fighters, Morgan Charrier is probably technically the worst fighter of the three of them, and yet he's the one in the UFC. And so
Crazy.
I think we need to see Jordan Vucenic in the UFC. We need to see Paul Hughes in the UFC, and I think the time is now.
French MMA is going to be coming at us here on the Balance Breakdown after that statement. But
Sherlock will come.
yeah. We started off talking about a fight that looked absolutely tremendous on paper and didn't deliver. Another fight that looked tremendous on paper and did deliver this weekend was Lonnie Kavanagh versus Sean Marcos de Silva in the Cage Warriors 125-pound division. This was a brilliant fight and a brilliant performance from Lonnie Kavanagh. Massively, massively impressed by what he went out there and produced against a really, really difficult opponent too, Harry. Were you just as impressed as what I was?
This to me was Lon Kavanagh's coming out party. I thought that he found his range against a very tricky De Silva very, very quickly. We talked about Kalen Loughran finding his range really quickly in his performance, but I thought Lon Kavanagh found his range just as quickly, if not quicker. And then we were just off to the races. Like, we were absolutely off to the races. Fair play for Sean De Silva for surviving that first round. There were some sketchy moments near the end of that round. And again, I think one of the, we've talked about this all the time, but one of the best things that can happen to a fighter, at least at an early level, is that they go in, they win well, but there's something to learn. And I think that's something to learn for Lon Kavanagh is he sort of took a slight moment of focus off when he hurt Sean De Silva. And I think if he'd have been nailed...
almost shocked, wasn't he? There's actually a picture of him...
lands the left hand.
There's a picture of him landing it, and then there's a picture, I think Dolly Crew got it. There was an excellent shot, as always, from her. His mouth was wide open, and one would say, why that? But that happens, Harry. That's I've been in there before, and I've hurt somebody, and you know, when you sometimes you surprise yourself because you don't feel like you have that level of capabilities, and something like that I think happened with Lonnie Kavanagh. But luckily for him, the more and more that you do it, and the more you believe in yourself that you can do it, the less that the surprise happens, and more direct action takes place. And I think you're spot on when you said that. That's an excellent assessment there.
And he will learn from that. And the next time he finds himself in that position and he catches a guy and he hurts him early, he'll finish him early. But I was really impressed with some of the diversity that we saw in his game. Very, very often in his last fights, we've just seen him just stand and just strike and defend takedowns. It was really great to see that there was some grappling in there.
Yeah, you had said that, you had yourself, which I'm not calling you up on what you said. I think you're right. There was some questions about his grappling. How are you feeling about it now, Harry?
So I think in an MMA context, it's still grand. And look, some of the grappling rounds that I've heard him going with are against really, really good black belts that are just grapplers. And so I would expect him to not do well in those specific rounds, right? But I think what we saw is offensively, his cage work is good. He's got some sequences against the cage. There were some question marks about how quickly Sean De Silva escaped the back and in the manner that he escaped the back. But again, they're slippery, they're bloody. It's MMA. Sometimes these things do happen. But over and back, I was very, very, very impressed with Lon Kavanagh. I think he should take a lot from that specific performance. De Silva is a very, very tricky customer. And The one thing I would like to see with Kavanagh, again, given how young he is, physically at a human level, I would like to see it's probably going to be a title shot next, right? And then after that, I'd like to see him defend it once or twice before we go to the UFC. I don't want to see Long Kavanagh chucked into that absolute fucking shark tank of a 125-pound division at like 8-0, 9-0. Let's get him to 10, 11, 12-0, something like that. And then if he wants to move on, fine, no problem. Let's treat Long Kavanagh similar to how we treat Tatuto Taira, where we are slow roll, and he'll just get there. He'll get there when he gets
slow roll. He's just signed a brand new deal with Cage Warriors. Think 5-fight deal. I tried my best to get him on before this fight, and it did not happen. But he's not an easy man to tie down, I tell you. But yeah, I think he signed a new deal with Cage Warriors. So, I mean, if it's one more than a title shot, if it's a title shot, then a couple of the defenses, that's what I'd like to see. You have to give him time to kind of progress at Cage Warriors before he gets thrown into the lines then at 125-pound division. Great stuff there. And that wraps us up. We're tight for time. You know, I'll give you the floor, Harry. Any other standout performances at Cage Warriors at all? Anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
I think all I will say is just again to retouch on how strange that Atlantic City card was. Just an absolute clusterfuck of an event. Some good storylines, some good things that come out of it, but by God, was that a fucking weird event. And again, Cage Warriors just killing it, absolutely killing it. Just
another monster card, monster card this weekend. This Dublin card is insane. We'll talk about it a little bit on the setup this week. On the Cage Warriors card, Mitchell Good pulled off a serious buggy choke, come from behind as well over Angus Hewitt. That was unbelievable. And very early in the night, Mariusz Miliajowski took out Joshua Unworthy with a flying knee. That was a vicious flying knee as well. Crazy scenes in the first fight. Don't know whether you've seen it. Janway Scott took on Jan Mattis, and he came out in the first round. Scott did, and he was slipping and sliding all over the shop. Did you see it?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then they went and they towel down his feet in between rounds, and he came out and absolutely busted up Mattis. He looked like he was on skating on ice in the first round, but solid card, that London card as well. That's a wrap for the balance breakdown. Go over and check out the Severe Spotlight. Jordan Vucenic has it shone on him this week. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. At BJJ_Harry Powell, at O'Neill MMA. We'll see you in a few days for the setup.